The Great Hall of the Galactic Council had seen many moments of crisis over the past 1,000 years. Wars between star systems, trade disputes that threatened entire sectors, and diplomatic incidents that could have torn the galaxy apart. But nothing like this. Nothing that made the strongest warriors in known space fall to their knees and beg. Ambassador Veltar of the Kethmori stood at the center of the massive chamber, his tall, crystalline body shaking with fear. Normally, a brilliant blue that showed pride and strength, now flickered with dull gray patterns that every species in the galaxy recognized as pure terror. Around him, representatives from dozens of worlds watched in stunned silence. The Kethmori were known throughout the galaxy as one of the most powerful military forces ever assembled. Their ships could crack planets in half. Their soldiers had never lost a major battle in over 3 centuries, and now their ambassador was on his knees, begging for help. "Please," Veltar's voice cracked as it came through the universal translator. "We have nowhere else to turn. The Devourers have taken 17 of our systems. Our homeworlds are gone. Our fleets." He paused, his whole body shuddering. "Our mighty fleets lasted 3 hours against these monsters." In the high seats that surrounded the chamber floor, Council Speaker Tessara shifted uncomfortably. Her tentacle-like arms moved in patterns that showed deep concern. She had ruled the Council for over 50 years and had never seen anything like this. The Tessara were an ancient race, one of the first to achieve spaceflight, and their records went back millions of years. Even they had no reference for what Veltar was describing. "Ambassador," she said carefully, "perhaps you could explain exactly what these Devourers are. Our records show no species by that name." Veltar looked up at her with eyes that had seen too much horror. "They came from the dark space beyond the rim worlds. At first, we thought they were just another aggressive species looking for territory. We sent our 3rd fleet to deal with them. Standard procedure for first contact with hostile aliens." He stood slowly, his movements shaky but determined. The chamber's holographic display activated, showing a 3-dimensional map of Kethmori space. 17 star systems were marked in red, indicating they were no longer under Kethmori control. The 3rd fleet had over 200 ships. Veltar continued. Battlecruisers, destroyers, fighter squadrons, some of the most advanced military technology in the galaxy. When they reached the first Devourer ship, they found something that should not exist. The hologram changed, showing grainy footage from a Kethmori battle recorder. The image was unclear, but it showed something that made several council members gasp in shock. The Devourer ship was not built, it was grown. Massive organic structures twisted through space, covered in what looked like living armor. Weapon ports opened and closed like breathing mouths. The entire vessel pulsed with a rhythm that was disturbingly similar to a heartbeat. "At first, our weapons worked," Veltar said. "Our plasma cannons cut through their armor, our missiles found their targets. We destroyed 3 of their ships in the first hour. We thought we had won." The hologram showed more of the battle. Kethmori ships moved in perfect formation, their weapons lighting up space with brilliant flashes. The organic Devourer ships twisted and writhed under the assault, pieces of their living hull spinning away into the darkness. But then they adapted. Veltar's voice dropped to almost a whisper. "Within minutes, our weapons stopped working. The plasma beams that had cut through their armor like paper suddenly had no effect. The missiles that had destroyed their ships were now absorbed into their hulls and used to make them stronger." General Zarkoth of the Rothgar warrior caste stood up from his seat. The Rothgar were known throughout the galaxy as the fiercest fighters alive. Their entire culture was built around honor and battle and death before surrender. For one of them to speak now meant the situation was beyond serious. "The Council must understand." Zarkoth's voice boomed through the chamber. "These creatures do not just destroy, they consume. They take everything from a world and use it to make more of themselves. Our people, our technology, our very culture, it all becomes part of them." The hologram shifted again, showing images that made even the battle-hardened council members look away. Worlds that had once been green and full of life were now gray and twisted. Cities had been converted into massive organic structures that pulsed with alien life. And everywhere the Devourers moved through the ruins, adding more and more biomass to their growing swarm. We tried everything, Veltar continued. We called in the 5th Fleet, then the 1st. We used planet-killer weapons. We tried biological warfare. Nothing worked. It's every tactic we used, they learned from. Every weapon we fired, they found a way to counter. And with each battle, they grew stronger while we grew weaker. Dr. Marcus Webb, the human representative, to the Council, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Humanity had only been part of the Galactic Council for 3 years. Ever since their primitive faster-than-light ships had been detected by Council patrol vessels, they were classified as a developing species under Council protection. Their ships could barely make it between star systems, let alone fight in major space battles. But something about the Devourer tactics troubled Webb in a way he could not explain. The adaptation, the consumption of enemy technology, the way they seemed to learn from every encounter, it reminded him of something from Earth's history, something that made his blood run cold. Council Speaker Tessara spoke again, her voice carefully controlled. What assistance are you requesting from the Council? Everything, Veltar said simply. Every ship, every weapon, every soldier you have. The ancient protocols speak of deep space monitoring stations that detect signals from the dark sectors beyond known space. There may be other civilizations out there, other species that could help us. We need to find them. Been scanned many times, said Representative Mordock of the Centauri Republic. There are no major civilizations beyond Council space, only primitive worlds and dead systems. Then we expand the search, Zarkith said firmly. Send probes further into the dark. There has to be someone out there who can help us fight these monsters. Oh. Webb found himself speaking before he fully realized what he was doing. General, may I ask about their reproductive cycle? How quickly do they multiply? The Rothgar warrior looked down at the small human with something that might have been surprise. In 3 years of Council membership, the human representative had rarely spoken during major sessions. They do not reproduce in any way we understand, Zarketh replied. They convert existing life forms. Single devourer organism can process an entire city in hours, turning every living thing into more of their kind. They do not need time to breed or grow. They simply consume and expand. Webb nodded slowly, his mind racing. The pattern was becoming clearer, and it was worse than he had feared. These Devourers were not just another hostile alien species. They were something far more dangerous, an apex predator that had evolved in the darkness between stars, perfectly, designed to consume and convert other life forms. How long do we have? Webb asked quietly. Veltar looked at him with eyes full of despair. Our intelligence suggests they will reach the core worlds within 6 months, maybe less if they continue. To grow at their current rate? The chamber fell silent. 6 months to find a solution to a threat that had destroyed one of the galaxy's most powerful military forces. 6 months to locate unknown civilizations in the dark space beyond the rim worlds. 6 months to somehow develop weapons and tactics that could stop creatures that adapted to every form of attack. Webb sat back in his seat, his mind already working on the problem. Somewhere in the darkness beyond Council space, there might be species that had dealt with threats like this before. Civilizations that had survived by learning to fight monsters that seemed unstoppable. He just hoped they could find them in time, and that when they did, those civilizations would be willing to help, rather than simply run deeper into the dark to save themselves. The Council session continued for hours, but Webb barely heard the debates and arguments that followed. His thoughts were focused on the deep space monitoring stations and the signals they had detected from the outer rim. Somewhere in that data might be the key to humanity's survival, because if the Devourers could destroy the Kethmori in a matter of months, what chance did a primitive species like humanity have when they came calling? Captain Lisa Hayes stood on the bridge of the UES Defiant, staring at the message that had appeared on their communication screens 3 hours ago. The ship was small by Council standards, barely 200 meters long, and carrying a crew of only 43 humans. It was one of only 12 ships that Earth had managed to build with faster-than-light capability. and it was supposed to be on a simple patrol mission along the outer edge of human space instead. They had picked up a distress signal that was being broadcast in 17 different alien languages. All of them were saying the same thing. Help us. The Devourers are coming. Anyone who can hear this message, please help us. Ma'am, we're getting more signals from the Kepler system, reported Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison from the communications station. Morrison was young, maybe 25, with the kind of steady nerves that made him perfect for deep space work. It looks like there's a running battle going on over there. Multiple ships, heavy weapons fire. Lisa studied the tactical display. The Kepler system was just outside the official boundaries of human space, but it was close enough that whatever was happening there could spill over into Earth territory. More importantly, the distress signals mentioned something called the Devourer Swarm, and Lisa had read Dr. Webb's reports from the council meetings. Commander Paul Stevens looked up from his tactical station. Stevens was Lisa's second-in-command, a veteran of the small conflicts that had marked humanity's early expansion into space. He was good at his job, but like most humans, he had never faced anything bigger than pirates or the occasional territorial dispute with other species. Captain, are we seriously thinking about getting involved in this? Stevens asked.
Recording.
To the Council databases, we barely have weapons that can damage a patrol ship, let alone fight something that has the entire galaxy running scared. Lisa turned to look at him. She was 34 years old and had been commanding ships for almost a decade. She had started her career on the old chemical rockets that had taken humans to Mars, then worked her way up through the early fusion drives, and finally to the primitive, faster-than-light vessels that had earned humanity a place in the Galactic Council. Paul, what do you know about wolves? She asked. Stevens blinked, confused by the sudden change of topic. Wolves. The animals from Earth? Not much, I guess. They hunt in packs. They're predators. They're also much smaller than bears, Lisa said calmly. Single wolf wouldn't last long against a grizzly bear in a straight fight. But wolves don't fight fair. They work together. They're smart, and they never give up. That's how they survived. When bigger, stronger animals went extinct, Morrison turned from his station. Captain, we're picking up massive energy signatures from the Kepler system. Whatever's happening over there, it's getting worse. Lisa walked over to the main view screen and activated the long-range sensors. The display showed a tactical overview of the Kepler system, and what she saw made her jaw tighten. Dozens of ships were scattered throughout the system, most of them clearly damaged or destroyed. The survivors were running, their faster-than-light drives charging as they tried to escape something that was pursuing them, and then she saw the pursuers. The Devourer ships were unlike anything in the Council databases. They were not built like normal spacecraft. Instead, they looked like they had grown, like some kind of massive sea creature that had adapted to live in the vacuum of space. Their hulls pulsed with organic rhythms, and weapon ports opened and closed along their sides, like breathing gills. Sweet Mary and Joseph, whispered Chief Engineer Roy Campbell from the engineering station. Campbell was old enough to remember the early days of human spaceflight, when every mission beyond Earth's orbit was a desperate gamble against the unknown. Those things are alive. Sensors are picking up 15 Devourer units, Morrison reported, his voice steady despite what they were seeing. They're moving through the system like they're hunting. Not random movement, Captain. They're working together? Lisa watched the tactical display with growing interest. The fleeing ships were clearly from one of the Council species, probably Kethmori, based on their energy signatures. They were fast and well-armed, with weapons that could vaporize a human ship in seconds. But they were running in panic, their formations broken, their movements desperate and uncoordinated. The Devourers, on the other hand, moved with a coordination that spoke of millions of years of evolution. They flowed through space like a school of fish, each unit perfectly positioned to support the others. When one of the fleeing ships tried to break away from the main group, 3 Devourer units moved to intercept it with the precision of a pack of wolves cutting a deer from the herd. They're not just fighting, Lisa said quietly. They're hunting. Stevens looked at the display and shook his head. Captain, we need to get out of here. If those things can take apart Council ships like that, what chance do we have? Before Lisa could answer, Morrison spoke up again. Ma'am, 3 of the Devourer units are breaking away from the main group. They're heading in our direction. Lisa felt something stir in her chest, something that had been sleeping in human DNA for thousands of years. It was the feeling that her ancestors had known when they heard wolves howling in the darkness beyond their campfires. It was fear, but it was also something else. Something that had kept humanity alive through ice ages and plagues and wars that had consumed entire continents. It was the recognition that she was looking at a predator. And in that recognition came a cold, calculating evaluation of exactly how to kill it. "All stop," Lisa ordered. "Let them come to us." "Captain." Stevens stared at her in disbelief. "Ma'am, we need to run. We need to get back to Earth and warn the government." "No." Lisa's voice carried a certainty that silenced the bridge. "We're going to see what these things are really made of." The 3 Devourer units approached the human ship with the confidence of apex predators that had never encountered serious resistance. They moved in a perfect triangle formation, their organic hulls pulsing with anticipation. As they got closer, Morrison's sensors began picking up the details of their construction. "Captain, they're scanning us," Morrison reported. "Some kind of biological probe. It's trying to access our computer systems." "Let it," Lisa said calmly. "Roy, are our weapons ready?" "Ma'am," Campbell replied from engineering. "Though I should mention that I've made some modifications to the warheads. Added some compounds that the Council considers unnecessarily dangerous for space combat." Stevens was still staring at the approaching Devourers. "Captain, those ships are 3 times our size. Our armor looks like it could absorb anything we throw at them." Lisa studied the tactical display with the focused attention of a hunter. Sizing up her prey, the Devourer ships were impressive, certainly. Their organic armor looked like it could adapt to different types of weapons fire. Their coordination suggested a hive mind that could process tactical information faster than any individual crew, but they were also predictable. They moved like creatures that had never encountered real resistance, had never faced an enemy that fought back with intelligence and determination. They expected their opponents to run or to fight in the same predictable patterns that every other species had used. They had never encountered humans. "Morrison, what's the status on that biological probe?" Lisa asked. "It's trying to map our neural patterns, Captain. Looks like it's designed to cause fear responses in the crew. Standard psychological warfare technique." Lisa waited for the fear to hit her. She had read the reports from the Council about how the Devourer terror weapons could paralyze entire crews with visions of cosmic horror and existential dread. Instead, she found herself thinking about her grandmother, who had lived through the Third World War and had told stories about the London Blitz, about people who had gone to work every morning while bombs fell around them, who had faced the end of civilization with nothing more than stubborn determination and a refusal to give up. "Ma'am," Morrison said, sounding puzzled, "the probe seems to be malfunctioning. It's not getting the expected response from our crew." "What kind of response is it expecting?" Stevens asked. "Panic. Submission," Morrison replied. "It's designed to make us afraid of death, afraid of the unknown, afraid of being insignificant in the face of cosmic forces." Campbell chuckled from his engineering station. "Well, that's not going to work on humans. We've been afraid of death since we climbed down from the trees, and we're still here." The lead Devourer unit was now close enough that they could see details of its construction on the main view screen. The organic hull was covered in weapon ports that opened and closed like mouths. Tendrils of living metal writhed along its surface, probably sensor arrays or communication systems. The entire ship pulsed with a rhythm that was definitely biological. It was also definitely alive, which meant it could die. "Paul, lock weapons on the lead ship," Lisa ordered. "Roy, prepare to fire on my command." "Captain, this is insane," Stevens protested. "Those things have destroyed entire fleets." Lisa turned to look at him, and Stevens saw something in her eyes that made him step back. It was the look of a predator that had just realized it was hungry. "Paul, those fleets were running away," Lisa said quietly. The first missile from the UES Defiant struck the lead Devourer ship exactly where Commander Stevens had calculated it would do the most damage. The warhead, loaded with what Chief Engineer Campbell cheerfully called Earth's finest chemicals, detonated against the organic hull with a flash that lit up the darkness of space. The explosion tore through the Devourer's living armor like it was made of paper. Chunks of biomechanical materials spun away into the void, trailing streams of what looked disturbingly like blood. The creature's hull convulsed, weapon ports snapping shut as it tried to contain the damage. Direct hits, Stevens reported, sounding surprised despite himself. Their armor is breaching. Whatever that thing is made of, it doesn't like our explosives. Captain Lisa Hayes watched the tactical display with the calm focus of a surgeon performing a delicate operation. The wounded Devourer was falling back, its two companions moving to protect it, while their own weapon systems came online. She could see the organic cannons opening along their holes, preparing to return fire. "Jake, what are they shooting at?" "Us," she asked. Lieutenant Commander Morrison studied his sensor readings. "Some kind of biological projectile, Captain. It looks like they're literally spitting at us." The Devourer weapons fired, launching what appeared to be living ammunition toward the human ship. The projectiles moved through space with an undulating motion, like swimming creatures that had adapted to survive in vacuum. As they got closer, Morrison's sensors picked up more details. "Ma'am, those things are trying to bore through our hull," he reported. "They're designed to eat through metal and then spread throughout the ship's systems." Lisa nodded calmly. "Roy, activate the defensive grid." Campbell's voice came over the intercom from engineering, sounding almost cheerful. "Activating point defense systems, Captain? Let's see how these bugs like a taste of good old-fashioned lead." The Defiant's defensive weapons came online, filling space around the ship with a cloud of high-velocity projectiles. The living ammunition from the Devourers ran straight into the defensive fire and simply ceased to exist, torn apart by impacts that turned them into harmless organic debris. "Well, that was disappointing," Morrison commented. "I was expecting something more challenging." Stevens looked up from his tactical station. "Captain, the other two ships are moving to flank us. They're trying to get us caught between them." Lisa studied the enemy formation. The Devourers were moving with the same coordination they had shown while hunting the Council ships. But their tactics were based on fighting enemies that would panic under pressure. They expected the human ship to either run or to fight defensively, trying to keep distance while trading long-range fire. They clearly had no experience with prey that fought back intelligently. "Jake, signal the lead ship," Lisa ordered. "Let's see if we can talk to whatever's driving that thing." Morrison worked at his console for a moment. "Channel open, Captain. We're broadcasting on all frequencies." Lisa stepped forward to address the main view screen. Even though the Devourer ships were too far away to see clearly, she had no idea if the creatures would understand human speech, but she wanted to try something. "Attention Devourer vessels," she said in a calm, conversational tone. "This is Captain Lisa Hayes of the United Earthship Defiant. You are trespassing in human space and threatening human interests. You have 30 seconds to withdraw, or we will consider you hostile." The response came immediately, but not through the communication system. Instead, the Devourer ship suddenly accelerated, moving toward the human vessel with a speed that should have been impossible for something their size. Morrison's sensors screamed warnings as the organic ships closed the distance in seconds. "They're trying to ram us?" Stevens said, his hands flying over his controls. "All ships, prepare for impact." But Lisa was already moving. Hard to port, full power to engines. "Roy, prepare the surprise package." The Defiant rolled away from the charging. Devourer ships with an agility that seemed to catch them off guard. The lead ship, still trailing debris from the earlier missile hit, shot past the human vessel and found itself suddenly alone and exposed. "Now," Lisa said quietly, Campbell had been waiting for this moment. Hidden in the Defiant's cargo bay was something that the Galactic Council had classified as a barbaric and unnecessarily dangerous weapon. When humans had first demonstrated it during their membership trials, it was a simple concept, really. Take a large chunk of dense metal, accelerate it to a significant fraction of the speed of light, point it at something you wanted to remove from existence. The Council species called it a kinetic kill vehicle. Humans called it a railgun. The projectile struck the wounded Devourer ship amidships at roughly 10% of light speed. The impact released more energy than a small nuclear weapon, and the organic hull that had seemed so tough and adaptable simply vaporized. The entire ship came apart in an expanding cloud of superheated plasma, taking its crew and whatever passed for its brain with it. "Target destroyed," Stevens reported, his voice filled with something that might have been awe. "Complete structural failure. There's nothing left bigger than a coffee cup." The two remaining Devourer ships seemed to pause in their attack, as if they were trying to process what had just happened. Lisa could almost imagine the confusion in whatever served as their minds. They had encountered thousands of species across the galaxy, had adapted to every weapon and tactic they had faced, but they had never seen anything quite like human engineering. "Ma'am, the remaining ships are changing their approach," Morrison reported. "They're spreading out, trying to attack from multiple angles." Lisa watched the tactical display as the Devourers shifted their formation. They were learning, she realized. They had seen one of their number destroyed by the railgun, and were adapting their tactics to avoid presenting such an easy target. That was exactly what she had been hoping for. "Paul, lock missiles on both targets," she ordered. "But don't fire yet. Let them get closer." Stevens looked at her with concern. "Captain, if we let them get too close, they might be able to board us. Those things look like they could tear through our hull with their bare hands." "That's the idea," Lisa said calmly. "Jake, start broadcasting a distress signal. Make it sound like we're panicking." Morrison raised an eyebrow but began transmitting. "Mayday, Mayday. This is the UES Defiant. We are under attack by unknown hostiles. Our weapons are having minimal effect. Requesting immediate assistance from any Council vessels in the area." The performance was convincing enough that Stevens actually started to look worried. But Lisa was watching the Devourer ships with the focused attention of a chess player who was 3 moves ahead of her opponent. The alien vessels took the bait exactly as she had hoped they would. Hearing what sounded like a panicked distress call, they abandoned their cautious approach and accelerated toward the human ship. Clearly intending to finish the fight quickly before any reinforcements could arrive, they were moving fast, but not fast enough to avoid what happened next. "Fire everything," Lisa ordered. The Defiant's missile tubes emptied in a single massive salvo, sending 12 warheads toward the approaching Devourer ships. At the same time, the railgun fired again, its projectile streaking toward the nearer target at a significant fraction of light speed. The Devourers tried to evade, their organic hulls twisting and writhing as they attempted to avoid the incoming fire. But they were moving too fast to change course effectively. And Lisa had calculated their approach vectors perfectly. The first ship took 3 missiles and the railgun projectiles simultaneously. The combined impact tore it into pieces that scattered across several thousand kilometers of space. The second ship managed to avoid the railgun shot, but flew directly into the path of the remaining missiles. The explosions lit up the darkness like a series of small suns. And when the light faded, there was nothing left of the Devourer ships except glowing debris and expanding clouds of vaporized biomatter. "Targets destroyed," Stevens reported, his voice filled with disbelief. "All contacts eliminated. The area is clear."
Oh.
Lisa nodded and turned to Morrison. "Jake, cancel that distress signal and contact the survivors from the original battle. Let them know the immediate threat has been neutralized." As Morrison worked at his console, Stevens looked at the tactical display showing the scattered remains of 3 ships that had terrorized the galaxy for months. "Captain, how did you know that would work?" Lisa walked over to the main view screen, which now showed the peaceful darkness of space where moments before there had been a life-and-death battle. "Paul, those things were apex predators. They had probably never encountered serious resistance in their entire evolutionary history. They were used to prey that ran or fought predictably." She paused, looking out at the stars. "But they made one critical mistake. They assumed that because we were smaller and less advanced than the Council species, we would be easier to kill." Campbell's voice came over the intercom from engineering. "Captain, we're picking up survivors from the original battle. Looks like a Kethmori transport ship. They're requesting permission to come aboard. Permission granted, Lisa replied. And Roy, prepare a full report on our weapons' effectiveness against Devourer ships. Something tells me this information is going to be very valuable very soon. The news of Captain Lisa Hayes' victory spread through human space faster than any ship could travel. Within hours of the battle, quantum communication networks carried the tactical data to every human colony. Every military outpost and every ship in the small but growing Earth fleet. On the bridge of the UES Retribution, Admiral Robert Kane read the battle report for the third time, his weathered face showing the kind of smile that made junior officers nervous. Kane was old enough to remember the early days of human space exploration, when every mission beyond Earth's orbit was a gamble against the unknown. He had fought pirates in the asteroid belt, negotiated with hostile alien traders, and watched humanity grow from a single-world species to a small but determined interstellar civilization. But he had never seen anything quite like this. "Admiral, we're receiving confirmation from all fleet elements," reported intelligence officer Amanda Cole from her station. Cole was young but brilliant, one of the new generation of humans who had grown up knowing that Earth was just one world among billions. 47 ships are ready for immediate deployment. All captains are requesting permission to engage. Kane looked at the tactical display showing the locations of every human vessel within range of the Outer Rim territories. 47 ships was not much by Galactic Council standards, but it represented almost the entire combat strength of the human fleet. More importantly, every one of those ships was crewed by people who had read the Defiance battle report and understood exactly what it meant. "Amanda, what's the current status of the Devourer forces?" Kane asked. Cole worked at her console, pulling up the latest intelligence reports from Council sources. According to intercepted communications, they've consumed 23 star systems in the past month. The Council estimates their total force strength at over 800 ships, with more being grown every day. "And our advantage?" Kane asked, though he already knew the answer. "They've never faced anything like us before," Cole replied. "Every species they've encountered has either run away or fought defensively. The Council races try to protect their worlds, their civilians, their infrastructure. They fight to minimize losses." Kane nodded slowly. "But we don't have anything to lose out here except ourselves. And we've been fighting to survive since we crawled out of the oceans." The communication system activated, showing Captain Derek Walsh on the main view screen. Walsh commanded the UES Savage, one of the newer ships in the human fleet. He was known throughout the service as someone who took risks that other captains would never consider. "Admiral, my ship is in position near the Vega system," Walsh reported. "We've identified a Devourer harvesting operation in progress. They're converting a mining colony into more of their kind. Request permission to engage." Kane studied the tactical data from Walsh's position. The Vega system was deep in what had once been Council space, now overrun by the Devourer advance. A single human ship attacking a harvesting operation would normally be considered suicide, but the battle reports from the Defiant had changed everything. "Permission granted, Captain," Kane said. "But remember, this isn't about winning fair fights. This is about making them afraid to turn their backs." Walsh grinned, and it was the expression of someone who had just been given permission to do something he had been wanting to do for a very long time. "Understood, Admiral. Savage out." The communication ended, leaving Kane alone with his thoughts and the growing reports from across human space. Every ship captain was asking the same question: when do we stop running and start hunting? Hours later, Kane got his answer. The EU's Savage struck the Vega harvesting operation at maximum speed. Emerging from faster-than-light travel directly inside the Devourer formation, the alien ships focused on converting the mining colony's population into more of their kind. Had no time to react before Walsh's ship was among them. But instead of engaging in a traditional space battle, Walsh did something that no Council species would have considered. He rammed his ship directly into the largest Devourer vessel at near light speed. The collision released more energy than most star system defense platforms could generate. The Devourer ship simply ceased to exist, vaporized by an impact that turned both vessels into expanding clouds of superheated plasma. The explosion disrupted the harvesting operation and scattered biomatter across 3 different planets. Breaking the hive communication network that coordinated the entire swarm, the surviving Devourer ships found themselves suddenly cut off from their collective intelligence, forced to operate as individuals for the first time in their evolutionary history. They were still dangerous, but they were no longer the perfectly coordinated killing machine that had terrorized the galaxy. Other human ships were quick to take advantage of the confusion. Commander Rachel Stone led a squadron of fighters through the Altair system, where the Devourers had established what they called a nursery world. Instead of attacking the ships directly, Stone's pilots seeded the planet's atmosphere with genetically targeted viruses that Earth's Biological Warfare Division had developed decades earlier. The viruses were designed to attack the specific protein structures that the Devourers used to convert other life forms. Within hours, the entire planet's ecosystem turned against the alien invaders. Plants that had been converted into devourer biomass began producing toxins. The atmosphere itself became poisonous to the creatures that had tried to remake it in their image. The nursery world that was supposed to produce thousands of new devourer units became a tomb that killed everything the aliens had built there. Captain Jennifer Brown of the UES Predator took a different approach entirely. Instead of attacking Devourers ships directly, she followed them back to their staging areas and then used Earth's most advanced stealth technology to plant nuclear mines throughout their supply lines. The mines were programmed to detonate when Devourer ships tried to transfer biomass between vessels, turning their own logistics network into a weapon against them. Every time they tried to grow stronger by sharing resources, the explosions tore their fleets apart from the inside. The pattern repeated across dozens of star systems. Human ships appeared without warning, struck with devastating effect, and then vanished back into the darkness before the Devourers could organize a response. They didn't fight like civilized species, following the rules of engagement that had governed galactic warfare for millennia. They fought like predators that had learned their tactics in the forests and jungles and ice fields of Earth. The only rule was survival, and the only victory was seeing another sunrise. Admiral Kane watched the reports flowing in from across the combat zone, each one describing another impossible human victory against overwhelming odds. The Savage had destroyed an entire harvesting operation with a single suicide run. The Predator had eliminated 3 Devourer supply convoys without firing a shot. Stone's fighter squadron had turned a planet-sized breeding ground into a graveyard. Admiral, we're receiving a priority transmission from the Galactic Council, Amanda Cole reported. It's marked as urgent. The main view screen activated, showing Dr. Marcus Webb in the council chambers. Behind him, Kane could see alien representatives arguing frantically among themselves, their voices creating a cacophony of fear and confusion. Admiral Kane, Webb said, his voice tight with urgency. The Council is demanding to know what human forces are doing in the combat zone. They're saying that our tactics are violating the established rules of warfare. Kane looked at Webb for a long moment, then began to laugh. It was not a pleasant sound, and it made several of the alien representatives on the screen step backward in alarm. Marcus, tell the Council that we're not fighting a war, Kane said. Wars have rules. Wars have objectives. Wars end with treaties. In negotiations? He paused, his expression growing cold. We're not fighting a war. We're hunting pests that need to be exterminated. And there are no rules for pest control. The communication ended, leaving Kane alone with his tactical displays and the growing list of Devourer losses. In less than a week, human forces had eliminated over 60 enemy ships and disrupted harvesting operations across a dozen star systems. More importantly, they had done something that no other species had managed to accomplish. They had made the Devourers afraid. For the first time in their evolutionary history, the creatures from the dark space beyond the rim worlds were encountering prey that fought back with intelligence, determination, and a complete willingness to do whatever it took to win. And for the first time since their expansion began, the Devourer advance had not only stopped, but was actually retreating. As individual ships fled from sectors where human forces had been reported, Kane looked out at the stars beyond the view screen. The enemy was trying to understand what had gone wrong with their perfect plan of conquest. They had expected to find more prey, more civilizations to consume and convert. Instead, they had awakened something that had been sleeping in the space between worlds, something that had spent millions of years learning how to kill things that needed to die, something that was just getting started. 3 months after the first human encounter with the Devourers, the Galactic Council chambers were filled with a tension that no one could remember experiencing before. Brett. Representatives from dozens of worlds sat in their assigned seats, but there. Attention was focused on the figures standing at the center of the Great Hall. Ambassador Altar of the Kethmori looked like he had aged years in the past few months. His crystalline skin, once brilliant blue with pride, now flickered with patterns that mixed relief with something that looked disturbingly like fear. Beside him stood General Zarkith of the Hrothgar warrior caste, his massive frame somehow seeming smaller than it had during the desperate days when the Devourers had seemed unstoppable. But it was the third figure that commanded the most attention. Dr. Marcus Webb, the human representative to the Council, stood quietly between the two alien officers, his simple uniform and plain appearance making him seem almost insignificant compared to the impressive aliens around him. Almost insignificant. Until you looked at his eyes. The Devourer threat has been neutralized, Veltar reported to the assembled council, his voice carrying across the chamber through the universal translator. The creatures that consumed 17 of our star systems, that destroyed our fleets, and harvested our people, have been driven back beyond the rim worlds. Their remaining forces are scattered and fleeing deeper into dark space. Council Speaker Tessara shifted in her elevated seat, her tentacle-like arms moving in patterns that showed confusion and concern. Ambassador, when you came before this Council 3 months ago, you told us that the Devourers were unstoppable. You said that every weapon we possessed was useless against them. What changed? Veltar looked at Dr. Webb, then back at the Council Speaker. What changed, Honored Speaker, was that we found allies we did not expect. Allies from the darkness beyond our borders. The chamber fell silent. Every representative knew what lay beyond the established borders of Council space. Empty systems, dead worlds, and the primitive species that humanity had evolved from. Nothing that could possibly threaten creatures that had terrorized the galaxy's most advanced civilizations. Perhaps you could be more specific, Tessara said carefully. General Zarkith stepped forward, his warriors' training evident in every movement. But when he spoke, his voice carried a tone that the Hrothgar were not known for. Respect mixed with something that might have been awe. 3 days ago, I was present when Admiral Kane of the human fleet delivered the final report on their campaign against the Devourers, Zarkith said. In 12 weeks of combat operations, human forces eliminated over 400 Devourer ships, destroyed 6 breeding worlds, and disrupted the enemy's command structure so completely that their remaining forces have abandoned this galaxy entirely. Chamber erupted in noise as representatives from dozens of species began talking at once. The numbers Zarkith had quoted were impossible. The entire Council fleet at full strength could not have achieved victories on that scale. General Tessara called over the chaos. Surely you are mistaken. The human fleet consists of fewer than 50 ships, most of them barely capable of interstellar travel. Zarkith looked at her with the expression of a warrior who had seen something that challenged everything he thought he knew about combat. Honored Speaker, I have reviewed the battle records personally. I have interviewed survivors from both sides. The numbers are accurate. Dr. Webb stepped forward, his quiet voice somehow carrying through the noise of the chamber. If I may, Honored Speaker, I think there has been a fundamental misunderstanding about what humanity represents in the galactic community. The chamber gradually fell silent as the alien representatives focused their attention on the small human figure. Webb looked around at the assembled aliens, most of whom towered over him, all of whom came from civilizations that were thousands of years more advanced than Earth. When the Council first made contact with humanity, we were classified as a developing species under protection protocols, Webb continued. This classification was based on our technology level, our limited space travel capabilities, and our apparent lack of military strength compared to established Council races. Tessara nodded. That assessment was correct based on the information Available at the time? Yes, it was, Webb agreed. But it was also incomplete. The Council evaluated humanity based on the same criteria used for every other species in the galaxy. Technology, population, resource control, military hardware. By those standards, we were indeed primitive. He paused, looking around the chamber at aliens whose species had achieved spaceflight when humanity was still discovering fire. What the Council failed to consider was why a species would choose to evolve on a world like Earth. The chamber was now completely silent. Even the background hum of the life support system seemed muted. Earth is what the galactic databases classify as a Class 12 death world, Webb continued. It has survived multiple extinctionary events, ice ages that lasted millions of years, volcanic eruptions that blocked out the sun for decades, asteroid impacts that vaporized entire continents, plague outbreaks that killed 90% of all life. Ambassador Veltar was staring at Webb with growing understanding. You are saying that humanity evolved under conditions that would destroy most species. Not just conditions that would destroy most species, Webb corrected. Oh. Conditions that did destroy most species. Earth has experienced 5 major extinction events. Each time, over 90% of all life on the planet died. Each time, the survivors had to adapt or join the fossils. General Zarkith was nodding slowly. This explains their tactics. Oh, they do not fight like civilized beings because they did not evolve under civilized conditions. Webb turned to look at the Rothgar warrior. General, your species evolved on a world with abundant resources and stable conditions. You developed concepts of honor and fair combat because you could afford to. Your ancestors never had to choose between survival and principles. The implications of what Webb was saying began to sink in around the chamber. Species that had developed under peaceful conditions, that had achieved civilization through cooperation and mutual respect, were beginning to understand what it meant to come from a world where cooperation was not optional, but required for simple survival. The Devourers were apex predators, Webb continued. In any normal ecosystem, they would have been the ultimate evolutionary achievement. They could adapt to any threat, absorb any technology, overcome any resistance. They were perfectly designed to dominate and consume. Tessera spoke carefully. But they encountered something that was not normal, encountered something from a death world. Webb said simply. They met a species that had evolved not just to survive, but to thrive, under conditions that would have killed them in hours. Every human alive today is descended from ancestors who survived ice ages, plagues, natural disasters, and predators that make the Devourers look like house pets. The chamber's main view screen activated, showing footage from the recent human military campaign. The images were disturbing to species accustomed to civilized warfare. Human ships moving through space like hunting packs. Suicide attacks that destroyed entire enemy formations. Weapons that violated every treaty unacceptable. Combat methods? Watch how they move, Webb said quietly. See how they coordinate without central command? How they adapt to changing conditions? How they turn every disadvantage into an advantage? This is not military doctrine. This is millions of years of evolution in action. On the screen, Admiral Kane's fleet finished its systematic destruction of a Devourer breeding facility. The human ships moved through the wreckage with the efficiency of scavengers cleaning up after a successful hunt, already preparing for the next engagement. The Devourers expected to find more prey, Webb continued. More civilizations like the ones they had already consumed. Species that would run when threatened, that would fight defensively to protect their worlds and their people. The footage changed, showing the aftermath of the human campaign. Star systems that had been consumed by the Devourers were now empty, except for scattered debris and automated beacons, warning of biological hazards. Instead, they found something that had been hiding in the darkness between the stars. Something that looked at cosmic horror and started taking notes on how to kill it more efficiently. Veltzer's voice was barely above a whisper. We begged for aid from the unknown reaches of space. We never asked what kind of creatures choose to live in that darkness. Webb turned to address the full council, his quiet voice somehow carrying to every corner of the vast chamber. Honored representatives, when you first contacted humanity, you assumed we were seeking your protection. You thought we wanted to join your civilization, to benefit from your knowledge and your peaceful way of life. He paused, looking around, at aliens who were beginning to understand that their assumptions about humanity might have been dangerously incomplete. What you actually did was wake up something that had been sleeping between the stars. Something that had evolved to survive in conditions that would kill most of you in minutes. Something that looks at the galaxy not as a community of civilized species, but as a hunting ground full of interesting challenges.